I was 22 when I started my first business. At the time, I was fresh out of college, broke, and full of ambition. I had no experience in business and was honestly just figuring it out as I went. But I had one thing going for me, an idea that I believed could change everything. I had always been obsessed with fitness and nutrition, and after months of trying various supplements, diets, and routines, I came across a problem that no one seemed to be addressing. It wasn't a lack of fitness programs or knowledge. It was the overwhelming choice of products in the market. You had protein powders, pre-workouts, multivitamins, but they were all from huge companies that felt impersonal. Most of the ingredients were loaded with stuff I didn't trust, and there were no straightforward solutions that seemed to genuinely work. The idea hit me. What if I could create a supplement line that was as transparent as possible, something that catered to the needs of real people, not bodybuilders or fitness enthusiasts trying to bulk up? A brand that just helped regular folks who wanted to stay healthy, have energy, and look good. It was a simple idea, but building it was far from easy. The first step was finding a manufacturer. I had zero connections in the industry, so I started Googling and cold emailing suppliers. After countless rejections, I found a small, family-owned business in a rural part of the country that was willing to take a chance on me. They didn't care about my lack of experience. They were more interested in the passion I had for creating something that could genuinely help people. I still remember the first time I walked through their facility. It was a small warehouse filled with giant vats of raw ingredients, and the air smelled of protein powder and herbs. I thought to myself, this is it. This is where my dream starts. I started by creating a single product, a clean, all-natural pre-workout drink. The goal was to make it simple, no artificial colors, sweeteners, or mystery ingredients. But this was a huge challenge because the supplement industry was filled with so many additives and chemicals that it seemed impossible to create a clean, effective product that actually tasted good. After months of trial and error, I had a formula that I was proud of. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. With the product ready, I began the next phase of the business, marketing. I didn't have much money, so I turned to social media. I started by creating an Instagram page where I posted about my journey, the challenges of starting a business, and my passion for fitness and health. To my surprise, people started following me. Slowly but surely, I gained a small but loyal following. But the real breakthrough came when I decided to post my first product launch. I had no idea how to market a product properly, but I knew one thing. I had to connect with my audience on a personal level. So, I shared a post about how my first batch of supplements had arrived, and I poured my heart into the caption. I talked about the struggles, the failures, and the passion behind the product. I made sure to be as real and authentic as possible. The response was incredible. I couldn't believe the number of people who were genuinely interested in what I had created. It felt like I had struck a chord with them. At first, sales were slow. I sold a few bottles here and there, but it wasn't anything to write home about. But I didn't give up. I kept posting, kept sharing my journey, and slowly but surely, the brand started to grow. What really helped was the word-of-mouth marketing. My first few customers were so passionate about the product that they started recommending it to their friends. This led to more sales, and as more people bought from me, I reinvested every penny back into the business. But growth brought new challenges. As the company started making a bit of money, I began to scale up production. That's when I hit my first major roadblock. The manufacturer I had been working with couldn't keep up with demand, and the quality of the product started to suffer. I spent weeks trying to find a new supplier, and the stress was overwhelming. I had to let go of a lot of customers who were waiting for their orders, and that stung. I hated letting people down. But eventually, I found a new, more reliable supplier who shared my commitment to quality, and we started to see growth again. One of the biggest lessons I learned during this time was the importance of customer feedback. I started reaching out to customers who had purchased from me, asking for their thoughts on the product. The feedback I received was invaluable. It wasn't just about the product itself. It was about the experience. I had to improve everything, from the packaging to the shipping process, to make sure my customers had a seamless experience. This was when I realized that running a business wasn't just about the product. It was about the whole experience you provided for your customers. A year after I launched the first product, the business had grown enough to hire my first employee. It was a huge step forward, and I remember feeling both excited and terrified. Hiring someone meant I had to be a leader, and that was something I had no experience with. But it felt good to finally have help, and together, we kept pushing the brand forward. We expanded the product line and started collaborating with influencers and fitness trainers who aligned with our brand values. This helped us reach a broader audience and gain even more trust in the market. But even as things were starting to look up, I had my doubts. The pressure of keeping the business afloat was always there. Some days, I wondered if I was cut out for this at all. But every time I felt that doubt creeping in, I reminded myself why I started the company in the first place, to help people. That vision kept me going. Fast forward to today, and the business has completely transformed. We now offer a full range of supplements, from pre-workouts to protein powders to vitamins. We've built a strong community around our brand, and our products are sold in over 100 countries. We're still a small company compared to the giants in the industry, but we've carved out our niche. It hasn't been easy, and there have been countless hurdles along the way, but I've learned more than I ever thought possible. If I could give any advice to someone starting out, it would be this: never stop learning. Every failure, every mistake, is a lesson. And most importantly, never lose sight of why you started. The road to success is long, and it's filled with challenges, but the most important thing is to keep moving forward, no matter how tough it gets. And remember, no one cares about your dream as much as you do. You're the one who has to fight for it every single day. Keep pushing, keep failing, and keep growing. Your story is just beginning. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. I've always had a fascination with technology. I remember the first time I took apart an old desktop computer my dad had sitting in the corner of our garage. I was around 12 years old, and I had no idea what I was doing, but I was determined to figure it out. My dad had no idea either, but once I managed to reassemble it, and it actually turned on, he looked at me with a mixture of shock and pride. That moment planted the seed for what would later become my entrepreneurial journey, though I didn't realize it at the time. Fast forward 10 years, and I found myself working at a large tech company in Silicon Valley. The job was everything I'd ever dreamed of in terms of pay, perks, and exposure to cutting-edge technology. But it was also soul-sucking. I'd work 12-hour days, constantly pushing out code and meeting deadlines, all while watching people around me get promoted over me for reasons that seemed arbitrary at best. One evening, after another unproductive day at the office, I found myself scrolling through social media. I was exhausted and frustrated, and that's when I came across an article about someone who had quit their corporate job to launch a successful startup. The idea of being your own boss, of building something from the ground up, had always intrigued me, but I'd never taken it seriously. After all, I had a steady paycheck, health insurance, and a clear career path. Yet here I was, questioning everything. I started doing research that night, poring over articles, reading about how to start a business, and even listening to podcasts. The more I read, the more the idea of entrepreneurship began to take hold. I wasn't sure what kind of business I wanted to start, but I knew I needed to get out of my current job. I was tired of feeling like a cog in the machine. I spent the next few months working on a side project while still working my corporate job. I knew I had to be discreet. After all, the last thing I wanted was for my employer to catch wind of what I was doing. I settled on developing an app. It was nothing revolutionary, just an app that helped users streamline their personal tasks. I figured there was a market for it, even if it wasn't groundbreaking. The first few months were a grind. I had no idea how to design a user interface or market an app. I had the technical knowledge, but the business side of things was an entirely different beast. I started looking for mentors, reaching out to people who had launched successful startups. Some responded, others didn't. I learned to pitch my idea in a way that made it sound bigger than it was, hoping that it would inspire confidence. Eventually, after a few failed attempts, I landed a mentor who was willing to work with me. He had launched his own tech startup a few years earlier and had since sold it for a nice profit. He was brutally honest but offered invaluable advice. He helped me understand the importance of market research, customer feedback, and how to build a brand. He also made me realize that if I wanted to take the leap, I had to be fully committed. Around the same time, my frustration with my corporate job reached a boiling point. I was passed over for a promotion again, despite working my tail off. I had a conversation with my manager, but it was clear they didn't care about my growth or my ambitions. I remember leaving that meeting feeling more deflated than ever before. I went home that night, sat in front of my computer, and made a decision. I was going to quit my job and pursue this startup full-time. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was now or never. I gave my 2 weeks' notice the next morning. I was terrified, but also excited. The hardest part was over, right? Now it was just about making it work. The next few months were a whirlwind. I launched the app, but it didn't take off immediately like I hoped. I made the rookie mistake of assuming that just because I thought my app was useful, others would too. I didn't do enough research into my target audience or their needs. I spent money on ads that didn't convert, and my app downloads were pitiful. I started doubting myself and the entire idea. Was I just another person with a pipe dream? But I refused to quit. I went back to the drawing board, this time taking my mentor's advice seriously. I started gathering user feedback, and it became clear that my app needed a lot of work. The interface wasn't intuitive enough, and users felt it was too complex for the problem it was trying to solve. It was humbling. I had spent months building something I thought was great, only to realize it wasn't. I decided to go back to the basics. I redesigned the app with a focus on simplicity and ease of use. I also started focusing more on social media marketing, building a community around the product, rather than just pushing ads. Slowly but surely, people started downloading it. The feedback improved, and I could see a slight uptick in revenue. It wasn't much, but it was progress. Then, about 6 months after the relaunch, I got my first big break. A small tech blog wrote about my app, and within a week, downloads shot up. That gave me the momentum I needed. I kept working on the app, refining it, and improving it based on user feedback. I even hired a part-time designer to help with the UI. Slowly, my app became something that people actually enjoyed using. About a year after leaving my corporate job, I had my first profitable month. It wasn't life-changing money, but it was a sign that I was on the right track. From that point on, it was a steady climb. I brought in more users, expanded my team, and started thinking about how to scale the business. Looking back, it wasn't a smooth journey. There were plenty of moments where I thought about giving up. But every time I hit a roadblock, I reminded myself that this was the path I had chosen, and I couldn't go back. There were sacrifices, late nights, missed social events, financial strain, but it was worth it. My app now has a steady user base, and it's grown to a point where I've been able to bring on investors and start thinking about new products. I won't say I've made it yet, but I'm proud of how far I've come. The most important lesson I've learned is that failure isn't the end, it's just part of the process. Every setback, every mistake, has taught me something valuable. It's a continuous learning experience. So if you're reading this and thinking about taking the plunge into entrepreneurship, I'd say this: it's not easy, and it's not fast. But if you're persistent, willing to learn, and able to adapt, you can build something meaningful. And most importantly, trust yourself. It's easy to doubt, but the only way you'll truly fail is if you give up. So, I never imagined that I'd go from barely scraping by to running a 6-figure business in just 5 years. Looking back, the whole journey feels like a combination of luck, grit, and lessons learned the hard way. But it all started with a simple idea that seemed like a long shot at the time. I was 26 when I decided to quit my 9-to-5 job. I had been working in a tech support role for a mid-sized company for about 3 years. While it paid the bills, I was completely uninspired. I'd spent my entire life hearing stories about people who followed their passion and built something incredible. But I didn't have that passion at the time. I wasn't obsessed with tech or sales or anything else. What I was obsessed with was freedom. Freedom from the monotony of corporate life. Freedom to make my own decisions. And I was willing to risk it all for that. At first, I had no concrete idea of what my business would be. But one thing I knew for sure was that I had no interest in launching something that required a large upfront investment. I didn't have money to burn, and I was terrified of failing financially. So, I started looking for low-cost business models that could allow me to build something without the need for major capital. That's when I stumbled upon dropshipping. For those who might not be familiar, dropshipping is an e-commerce model where you sell products without ever holding inventory. When someone buys something from your store, the product is shipped directly from a third-party supplier to the customer. You never touch the product, which means minimal risk and startup costs. The idea seemed simple enough. All I needed was an online store, a niche, and a way to market the products. I watched dozens of YouTube videos, read blog posts, and joined forums where people discussed their experiences. I was excited and eager, but I was also nervous. The competition was fierce, and I knew that just setting up a website and waiting for customers to show up wouldn't cut it. I spent the first couple of months researching products and trying to find the right niche. I didn't want to sell generic items that everyone else was selling. I wanted something unique, something that would stand out in the sea of e-commerce stores. After weeks of trial and error, I decided to focus on pet accessories, specifically custom-made pet collars. It wasn't a groundbreaking idea, but it was something I felt had potential. People love their pets, and they're willing to spend money to make their pets look cute or unique. Setting up the website was surprisingly straightforward. I used Shopify, which made it easy to create a professional-looking store. I found a supplier who would handle the customizations and shipping, and I began to build out my product listings. But then came the hard part, getting traffic. I had no idea about digital marketing at the time, so I pored over tutorials about Facebook ads, Google ads, and SEO. I knew that if no one visited my store, all my work would be for nothing. After countless hours of learning, testing, and tweaking, I finally launched my first ad campaign. The first few days were quiet. A few clicks, a few visitors, but no sales. I remember feeling discouraged. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe this was a bad idea. I even started looking for jobs again, just in case. But I refused to give up. I dug deeper into the data, figured out what wasn't working, and adjusted my campaigns. Slowly but surely, the sales started trickling in. First one, then two, then five. Then, a month in, something clicked. I had learned enough to know what worked and what didn't, and the sales started coming in faster than I could have imagined. By the end of the second month, I had made enough profit to cover my bills, and that was a game changer. I realized that this could be something bigger, but with that came more pressure. I had to scale the business. Scaling was hard. I had to hire help, refine the supply chain, and learn how to manage a growing operation. I started outsourcing tasks like customer service and social media management. I didn't want to do everything myself anymore, but at the same time, I was terrified of losing control. I was still in the early stages, so every mistake felt like it could be the end. Around the 6-month mark, I was starting to get some decent traction. The profits were growing, and I was able to pay myself a small salary. But I still wasn't living the dream just yet. There were a lot of sleepless nights, trying to figure out how to keep up with orders and make my brand stand out. It felt like a constant hustle, but I was determined to keep going. I remember one particularly rough day when I was dealing with an issue with one of my suppliers. They messed up a large order, and it was an absolute disaster. Customers were furious, and I didn't know how to fix it. I was on the phone with the supplier for hours, trying to get them to send replacement orders and handle the complaints. That night, I sat in my office, feeling completely defeated. I thought about quitting again, but then I thought about the progress I had made. I'd come too far to quit now. Instead of throwing in the towel, I doubled down. I offered refunds, sent out free replacement items, and worked tirelessly to resolve the issue. I was transparent with my customers, apologizing for the mistake and assuring them that it wouldn't happen again. To my surprise, many of them appreciated my honesty and even became repeat customers. That experience taught me a valuable lesson. No matter how bad things got, as long as I kept working hard, learning, and adjusting, I could make it work. Fast forward to today, and my business is doing better than I ever expected. I've expanded into other product lines, hired a small team, and am working on automating parts of the business so I can focus on growth. The road hasn't been easy, but every challenge has made me stronger and more resilient. Now, I'm in a place where I can take a vacation when I want, spend more time with family, and focus on projects I'm passionate about. Most importantly, I've found the freedom I was looking for when I left my 9-to-5 job. My business still isn't perfect, but it's mine, and that's something I'll always be proud of. So, if you're thinking of starting a business, my advice is simple: start small, stay consistent, and never give up. There will be setbacks, mistakes, and moments of doubt, but those are just part of the process. If you keep pushing through, you'll get to a place where all that hard work starts paying off. And when it does, it'll feel so damn worth it. I had always been the kind of person who wanted more. Growing up in a small, sleepy town, it seemed like everyone was happy with the simple life. But I wasn't. I would listen to people talk about their jobs, their daily routines, and how they didn't mind that life was a predictable string of events. It never sat well with me. I always wanted something bigger, something that would challenge me in ways I couldn't even imagine. It was around the time I finished high school that I realized I wanted to own my own business. The problem was, I had no idea what kind of business I wanted to start. I tried a few things here and there. I attempted selling clothes online, tried a dropshipping venture, and even thought about creating an app. None of it worked. I made a little money, sure, but it was never consistent. I had some skills in graphic design, so I freelanced for a while, but after working 16-hour days and barely scraping by, I knew I had to figure something else out. One night, as I was burning the midnight oil on a project for a client, I saw a social media post about a new food trend. It was something called meal prep, and it was blowing up. People were posting about how much time it saved them and how much healthier they were eating because they could plan their meals for the week in advance. It clicked for me. I could get into the food business, but not in a traditional restaurant way. I wanted to create a service where people could get pre-made, healthy meals delivered to their door every week. I started researching everything I could about meal prep, food delivery models, and customer needs. I had no experience in the food industry, but I wasn't going to let that stop me. I had to learn fast. I realized that I could start small, serving a local market, and then scale from there. I looked up local food suppliers, local kitchens that rented out space, and even learned about the legalities involved in starting a food delivery service. The first challenge came when I tried to secure a kitchen. In my area, renting commercial kitchen space was difficult. There were a few available spots, but most were either too expensive or in inconvenient locations. After months of searching, I found an old restaurant that had recently closed down. The building was run down, but the price was right. I made a deal with the owner, who was willing to rent the kitchen for a fraction of the price of other commercial kitchens. I had no experience managing a kitchen, but I knew that I could learn. I figured if I could hire a good chef and staff, I could focus on running the business side of things. So, I did exactly that. I began developing a menu, working with a local nutritionist to ensure the meals were balanced and healthy. After weeks of trial and error, testing recipes, and refining the menu, I was ready to launch. I called the business Prep to Go. It was simple, straightforward, and to the point. Next came the marketing. I knew social media was going to be key, but I had no idea how to properly use it to market a business. I started by creating Instagram and Facebook pages, posting pictures of the meals, and using hashtags like #mealprep and #healthyfood. I didn't have much of a following, but I knew I had to get the word out. So, I reached out to local influencers, food bloggers, and fitness enthusiasts. I offered them free meals in exchange for a shout-out on their accounts. Slowly but surely, word began to spread. I ran my business out of that small rented kitchen for about 6 months, and it was a grind. Every day, I was either managing the kitchen, handling customer service, or dealing with logistics. There were times I thought I'd made a huge mistake. We had some rough days where orders came in late or meals weren't up to standard. But the customer feedback was overwhelmingly positive. The subscribers started coming in, and I began to see consistent growth. It wasn't until my first big order came through that I realized I had truly made it. A local gym chain contacted me about providing weekly meal prep services for their members. They wanted to offer discounted meal plans to their clients who were trying to eat healthier. The contract was big, and it was exactly what I needed to scale the business. I had no idea how I was going to fulfill such a large order, but I figured it out. I partnered with local delivery drivers and even started offering a subscription service to make it easier for people to sign up. By the time a year had passed, I had moved out of that tiny rented kitchen into a larger facility, hired more staff, and expanded my menu. The business grew rapidly, and the extra income from working with gyms and local businesses helped fuel the expansion. But just as things were going well, I hit a major roadblock. A competitor moved into the market. They had more money, more resources, and they were offering cheaper prices. I started to panic. Would my customers leave for the cheaper option? Was all my hard work for nothing? Instead of giving up, I decided to double down. I knew that my meals were of a higher quality, and I had developed a loyal customer base. So, I focused on enhancing customer experience and building a stronger brand. I offered more customization for the meal plans, introduced new features like a rewards program, and increased the quality of customer service. I also partnered with local gyms to create exclusive meal plans for members. Slowly, the competition started losing traction. They couldn't match the personalized experience I was offering, and my customer base began growing again. 2 years after launching, Prep to Go had grown beyond what I could have ever imagined. We had expanded to multiple cities, and I had started a full-fledged team to help manage everything from logistics to customer service. I had achieved a level of success that seemed impossible when I first started, but I never stopped working toward that goal. Today, we serve thousands of customers every week, and I'm proud of what we've built. It hasn't been easy, and it's been a constant struggle to stay ahead of the competition, but the one thing I've learned through it all is that success doesn't come overnight. It's about making the right decisions, learning from mistakes, and never giving up. Every step along the way has been a learning experience, and now, I look back at where I started with a deep sense of gratitude and pride. If there's one thing I want people to take away from my story, it's this: don't be afraid to fail. Failure is just part of the process. And if you're willing to keep going, even when things get tough, the rewards will follow. I'm living proof that hard work, persistence, and a little bit of luck can turn a small idea into something big. Don't let fear hold you back. You're capable of more than you think. I never thought I would be an entrepreneur. In fact, for most of my life, I assumed that being successful meant working for someone else, climbing the corporate ladder, and enjoying a stable paycheck at the end of the month. But life, as it often does, had other plans. Let me take you back to the beginning. I grew up in a small town where the idea of owning a business was foreign to most people. My family wasn't poor, but we were definitely middle class. My dad worked as a high school teacher, and my mom was a nurse. We were comfortable, but we never had excess. Most people in my town worked in factories or office jobs, and no one really talked about dreams of entrepreneurship. When I graduated high school, I had no clue what I wanted to do. My parents pushed me to go to college, so I enrolled in a general business program. I figured that with a degree in business, I could at least land a decent job somewhere. It was a safe bet, but I quickly realized that I wasn't passionate about business as an academic subject. The classes felt boring, and I was constantly looking for something that would ignite my interest. That spark came during my junior year. I was taking a class in marketing, and the professor showed us a documentary about the rise of a small startup that turned into a multi-million-dollar company in just a few years. I can't even remember the name of the company, but I'll never forget how I felt watching that documentary. It was like someone flipped a switch in my brain. I realized that people weren't just employees. They were creators, innovators, risk-takers. They were building something from nothing. And that was what I wanted to do. I started looking for side projects to get my feet wet in the business world. I tried selling things online, dabbling in dropshipping, and even tried my hand at designing t-shirts. None of it was particularly successful, but I was learning a lot. I read books, listened to podcasts, and followed entrepreneurs on social media. Slowly, I started to understand what it took to start a business. But even though I was absorbing all this information, I still felt like I wasn't ready to take the leap. It was terrifying. I watched friends around me take internships and secure full-time jobs after graduation, while I was just trying to figure out what to do next. I graduated college and got a job in marketing at a mid-sized tech company. It wasn't the dream job I had envisioned, but it paid the bills, and I was learning a lot. I spent my days working on email campaigns, managing social media accounts, and writing blog posts. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a job. And as much as I hated to admit it, I was getting comfortable in my role. The problem was, I felt stuck. There was no room for advancement. I had ambitious dreams, but the reality was that my job was a glorified 9-to-5 with no real potential for growth. I started feeling like I was wasting my time. I wanted more. That's when I stumbled upon the concept of side hustles. I had heard about it before, but I didn't really understand what it meant until one night I was scrolling through Reddit and stumbled across a thread about people who had built successful businesses on the side while still working full-time jobs. It clicked. This was the answer. If I could start something small on the side, I could gradually build it up and eventually make the transition to full-time entrepreneurship without taking on too much risk. I knew I needed to get serious. So, I took the plunge and decided to start an online store selling eco-friendly products. It wasn't the most original idea, but it was something I was passionate about. I had always cared about the environment, and I thought there was a growing market for sustainable products. I spent every spare minute of my evenings and weekends researching suppliers, building a website, and creating social media profiles. At first, it was a mess. I made mistakes left and right. The website was clunky, the product descriptions were weak, and I had no idea how to drive traffic to the site. My first month, I made a total of $25 in sales, most of which went to paying for the website and advertising. It was disheartening, but I refused to give up. I kept tweaking the site, improving the product pages, and learning more about marketing. I started experimenting with Facebook ads, influencer marketing, and email campaigns. Slowly, things started to click. By month 3, I had my first $1,000 sales month. I couldn't believe it. That was more money than I had ever made selling anything online. It wasn't enough to quit my job, but it was enough to fuel my belief that I was onto something. I doubled down. I started working longer hours on the business, often staying up late after my full-time job to make progress. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. The fear of failure never went away. There were plenty of nights when I thought about quitting, when I questioned whether I was being foolish for taking this risk. But I kept pushing through, one small step at a time. And eventually, things started to snowball. About 6 months into the business, I reached a turning point. The sales were consistent enough that I could see the potential for growth. I started outsourcing some tasks, like customer service and inventory management, to free up my time. I began building a small team to help with content creation, social media, and fulfillment. By the time I hit the 1-year mark, my side business was bringing in more than my full-time job. It wasn't a huge amount, but it was enough that I felt confident making the leap. So, I quit my job and went all in. It was terrifying, but it was also exhilarating. I was finally in control of my future. In the years that followed, my business grew exponentially. I expanded my product line, optimized my marketing efforts, and refined my customer service. I had a lot of failures along the way, but each one taught me valuable lessons. Looking back, I realize how much I underestimated the role that persistence played in my success. Entrepreneurship isn't about avoiding failure. It's about learning from it and moving forward. There were times when I wanted to give up, but I didn't. And that made all the difference. I'm not rich, and I don't have a private jet or anything like that. But I'm proud of what I've built. My business supports a small team, and we're making a real impact in the world of eco-friendly products. I'm living proof that you don't need to have a groundbreaking idea or a trust fund to be an entrepreneur. You just need a little bit of passion, a lot of persistence, and the willingness to take that first step, no matter how scary it might seem. So here's a story about how I went from being a broke college graduate to running my own startup. It wasn't an easy journey, but the lessons I learned were invaluable. I graduated from college with a degree in business, but to be honest, I didn't really have a clear direction at the time. I didn't get into the big corporations or land some prestigious job offer like my friends did. In fact, the best job I had lined up after graduation was a part-time gig at a local coffee shop. Not exactly what I dreamed of when I was spending late nights studying finance and marketing textbooks. I spent months after graduation applying for every job I could find, but nothing seemed to stick. Rejection emails piled up, and my student loan payments started rolling in. I found myself sinking into a deep sense of uncertainty and frustration. A few months later, I had a moment of clarity while sitting in my car during my lunch break at the coffee shop. I realized I had two options: keep working at the shop and hope for something better, or take a huge risk and try to start my own business. I'd always had an interest in tech, but I had zero experience building anything substantial. I was constantly tinkering with websites in my free time, and I had a basic understanding of coding, but that was about it. Still, I figured there was no better time than now to dive in. With my savings dwindling, I made the decision to quit the coffee shop and start working on my own startup. It wasn't like I had a revolutionary idea or something game-changing in mind. In fact, I started off trying to create an app that helped people track their goals and habits. It was going to be simple, with just a few features to begin with. The problem was, I didn't know anything about app development. I spent the first couple of months teaching myself how to code, mostly from YouTube tutorials and online forums. I'd sit in my tiny apartment, my only light source being the glow of my laptop, learning how to turn my ideas into actual code. Things weren't going well, though. My first few attempts at building the app were complete failures. The app would crash, the UI looked awful, and nothing seemed to work the way it was supposed to. I remember having moments where I thought about giving up. My savings were running out fast, and there were days when I wasn't even sure what I was working toward. I didn't have a mentor, a network, or any real experience. But something inside me kept pushing forward. Maybe it was pride, or maybe it was sheer stubbornness, but I refused to let it go. After about 6 months of working day and night, I finally had something that resembled a functional app. It wasn't perfect by any means, but it worked. I launched it in the App Store and immediately ran into the next problem. No one was downloading it. I had no audience, no marketing plan, and no real way to reach people. It felt like I had just thrown my app out into the void. I knew I needed to find a way to get some traction. After a few more weeks of struggling with marketing, I decided to experiment with social media. I started posting regularly on Twitter, Instagram, and Reddit, showing behind-the-scenes progress of the app, sharing some of the lessons I was learning along the way, and just being authentic about the challenges I was facing. I didn't have much of a following at first, but slowly people started noticing. One day, a Reddit user stumbled upon my posts and offered some constructive feedback on my app. He suggested I focus on improving the user interface and simplify the app's features. I took his advice to heart and spent the next couple of months refining the design. Meanwhile, I kept engaging with the Reddit community, asking for feedback, and offering updates on the app's progress. Little by little, I gained a small but loyal following. I also learned about the power of content marketing. I started writing blog posts on Medium about my experience building the app, the mistakes I'd made, and the lessons I'd learned. These posts didn't get a lot of views at first, but over time, they started getting noticed by the right people. One of the most pivotal moments came when a tech blog wrote a feature about my app. I had sent an email to the writer, explaining my story and how my app could help people build better habits. To my surprise, they responded, and the next thing I knew, my app was being talked about on a popular blog. Downloads started picking up, and for the first time, I felt like I was making progress. The success didn't come overnight, though. The app continued to grow, but it was a constant grind. I had to deal with customer support, bug fixes, and constant iteration. My tiny apartment became my office, and the lines between work and personal life became blurry. The pressure started to mount, and I felt the weight of responsibility on my shoulders. But there was also this immense satisfaction that came from knowing I was building something from nothing. Over the next couple of years, I brought in a small team to help with development, marketing, and customer support. We expanded the app's features, added a premium version, and started running paid ads. Slowly but surely, the app started generating revenue. It wasn't easy. There were countless moments of doubt, frustration, and exhaustion. I remember having nights where I would just sit in front of my laptop, wondering if it was all worth it. But every small win, whether it was a positive customer review or a new feature working flawlessly, kept me going. Today, I'm proud to say that my startup is thriving. We've expanded into new markets, and our user base has grown exponentially. We've even been featured in larger media outlets, and I've been invited to speak at conferences about entrepreneurship. My life looks completely different now than it did when I was stuck in that coffee shop. Looking back, the hardest part wasn't building the app or even dealing with the technical challenges. It was believing in myself when no one else did. There were plenty of times when I felt like giving up, but I kept pushing forward, one step at a time. And while I still have a long way to go, I can say with confidence that taking that risk and starting my own business was the best decision I've ever made. If there's one thing I've learned from this experience, it's that the path to success isn't linear. There are going to be setbacks, failures, and moments where you'll wonder if it's all worth it. But if you stay persistent, keep learning, and surround yourself with people who support you, you can build something truly incredible. I was never the type of person who would have labeled myself as an entrepreneur. To be honest, I didn't even know what it really meant. Growing up, my parents had a small grocery store in a suburban area, and we lived a modest life. They always told me to focus on getting good grades, get into a good college, and work a stable 9-to-5 job. So that's exactly what I did. I went to college, graduated with a degree in accounting, and quickly landed a decent job at a mid-size firm. I was the guy who showed up early and stayed late, just to make sure everything was perfect. The steady paychecks, benefits, and security were enough to keep me content. But there was always something missing. I can't quite describe it, but I felt like I was running in a hamster wheel. Sure, I was progressing, but it never felt like I was getting closer to my true goals. That's when things took a strange turn. It all started with an email from an old college buddy, Mark. He and I were never close, but we kept in touch over the years through occasional Facebook posts and casual conversations. Mark had started a tech company, and out of nowhere, he reached out to ask if I'd be interested in becoming his business partner. At first, I thought it was a joke. I had no background in tech, and the idea of jumping into a new venture terrified me. I mean, I was a numbers guy, not some Silicon Valley tech genius. But Mark convinced me to meet him for coffee, and during that conversation, he sold me on the idea of starting something together. His startup was struggling with cash flow issues, and he needed someone who could help with the financial side of things. I had the expertise, he had the vision, and together, we could fix the company. Or at least, that's what he claimed. I told myself that it would be a side project at first. After all, I had my full-time job, and I didn't want to risk everything for something that might fail. But little did I know that coffee meeting would change the course of my life. The first few months were a blur. I was working long hours at my day job, and then staying up late working on the startup. The company was in a rough spot, and the pressure was intense. Mark and I would meet up after work to go over finances, brainstorm ideas, and discuss strategies. I felt like I was back in college, juggling schoolwork and trying to keep everything afloat. But the more time I spent with Mark, the more I started to believe in what we were doing. We found ways to optimize the company's financial structure, cut unnecessary costs, and create better cash flow management systems. Slowly but surely, the company started to turn around. Then came the biggest breakthrough. We landed our first big client. It wasn't a huge deal, but it was enough to give us a little breathing room. Mark was ecstatic, and so was I. That feeling of accomplishment was unlike anything I had experienced before. For the first time, I wasn't just a cog in a corporate machine, I was building something from the ground up. As the business grew, my full-time job started to feel more like a prison. Every day I was torn between the two. I'd sit in meetings at my accounting firm, staring at the clock, wondering what was happening at the startup. The truth was, the startup had taken on a life of its own, and it was starting to feel like my real job. The corporate world felt stifling, and every morning, I'd have a pit in my stomach as I drove into work. I wasn't excited about spreadsheets and tax returns anymore. What excited me now were the endless possibilities of our startup. So, after months of internal struggle, I finally made the decision. I quit my job. It was terrifying. The security of a steady paycheck was gone, and there was no going back. But I knew I had to take the plunge. I wasn't getting any younger, and this was my shot at something bigger. Mark and I went all in on the business. There were plenty of sleepless nights, disagreements, and times when it felt like the world was against us. But with each small success, we gained momentum. We hired our first employee, developed new features for our product, and started gaining traction in the industry. There were moments when I questioned whether we were making the right decisions. There were times when our financials didn't add up, and I'd have to make hard calls. But every time we faced adversity, I felt this overwhelming sense of pride knowing that we were building something together. The next few years were a whirlwind. We faced fierce competition, changing market trends, and growing pains, but we pushed forward. Our company started to scale rapidly, and we eventually raised funding to accelerate our growth. With investors backing us, we were able to expand into new markets, hire more talent, and continue improving our product. In the midst of it all, I learned some valuable lessons about what it really means to be an entrepreneur. It's not just about the hustle and grind. It's about adaptability and resilience. It's about knowing when to pivot, when to ask for help, and when to trust your instincts. But most importantly, it's about having the courage to take risks and believe in something bigger than yourself. Fast forward 5 years, and the company is doing well. We've scaled, become profitable, and are now working with some of the biggest names in our industry. But the journey hasn't been easy. I still remember the nights when I would stay up late, staring at spreadsheets, wondering if we could make payroll or if we were heading for disaster. The emotional roller coaster has been intense, but looking back, I wouldn't trade it for anything. Now, I often reflect on how far we've come. I think about the guy I used to be, the one who sat in a corporate office, content with his steady job. I never imagined I'd be here, leading a company that I helped build from the ground up. Sometimes I still have imposter syndrome and wonder if I'm really cut out for this. But then I remind myself of how much we've accomplished and how far we've come. The imposter syndrome is just a reminder that we're always growing, always evolving. If you're reading this and thinking about taking the leap into entrepreneurship, my advice is simple. Don't wait for the perfect moment because it will never come. Take risks, learn from your mistakes, and trust the process. It won't be easy, but if you stick with it, it will be worth it. In the end, entrepreneurship isn't about being fearless. It's about having the courage to keep going even when you're scared. It's about finding purpose in the journey, not just the destination. And, most importantly, it's about believing in yourself, even when no one else does. This is the story of how I went from a corporate drone to an entrepreneur. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm excited to find out. This is the story of how I went from being broke and unsure of my future to running a successful tech startup. It wasn't easy, and it definitely didn't happen overnight. But looking back, I can pinpoint the exact moments that made all the difference. It all started a few years ago, when I was still living paycheck to paycheck, struggling to pay rent, and constantly stressed out about where my next meal would come from. I had just graduated from college with a degree in computer science. While most of my peers were landing jobs at big tech companies, I found myself stuck in a series of dead-end positions. I worked as a freelance developer for a while, taking on small jobs through platforms like Upwork, but the pay was low and the hours were long. I was constantly hustling, never knowing if I would make enough money to cover my bills. I knew I had the skills to do more, but I didn't have the network or the experience to break into a more lucrative career. One night, after finishing a particularly grueling coding project for a client who hadn't paid me yet, I sat down and had a moment of clarity. I was tired of the grind, tired of depending on other people's whims to make a living. I needed to do something for myself, build something from the ground up. But what? It was around this time that I stumbled upon an article about a small startup that had made it big by developing an app to help people manage their personal finances. The app was simple, yet effective. It was a solution to a problem that almost everyone faced, managing their money, and it had struck a chord with users. I thought to myself, why can't I do something like that? I have the skills. I just need an idea. I spent the next few weeks brainstorming, trying to come up with a unique idea that could resonate with people. I knew I didn't want to build just another app or service that would get lost in the noise of an already crowded market. I wanted to create something with real value, something that could make people's lives better. Eventually, after days of research and endless notes, I came up with the idea of creating a platform to help small businesses streamline their invoicing and payment processes. At first, it felt like a long shot. There were already accounting tools out there, but none of them were simple or user-friendly enough for the small businesses I had in mind. I was thinking about local coffee shops, freelance designers, and small retail stores that didn't have the time or resources to deal with complicated accounting systems. I envisioned a simple, intuitive platform where business owners could easily create invoices, track payments, and even automate follow-ups. It would be affordable and easy to use, something anyone could pick up without needing a degree in finance. The idea was born, but now came the hard part, getting it off the ground. I didn't have any money to invest, and I certainly didn't have the connections that would open doors for me. But what I did have was determination. I decided to build the MVP, minimum viable product, myself. I locked myself in my apartment for weeks, working day and night. I poured everything I knew about coding into this project, tweaking and refining the platform as best as I could. It wasn't perfect, but it was functional. Once the MVP was ready, I realized I had a big problem. I had no idea how to market it. I had spent so much time coding and building, I hadn't thought about how I was going to attract users. I turned to Google and Reddit for advice, reading countless articles on startup marketing. The one thing that kept coming up was the importance of finding your niche. I focused my efforts on small businesses that I could connect with directly. I reached out to local coffee shops, freelance designers, and even a few friends who owned small businesses to offer them a free trial of the platform in exchange for feedback. Slowly but surely, word began to spread. My first paying customer came from a local graphic designer who loved how simple the invoicing tool was. She told her friends about it, and before long, I had a small but growing user base. The next hurdle came when I realized the platform wasn't quite as scalable as I had hoped. As more users signed up, the system started to slow down. I was facing the reality of needing to invest in better infrastructure if I wanted to grow. That's when I decided to pitch my idea to investors. I had no experience with pitching, and I wasn't sure if anyone would be interested, but I had nothing to lose. I sent out a dozen emails to local venture capitalists and angel investors, not expecting much. To my surprise, one of them responded. He liked the idea and wanted to meet with me. We sat down for coffee, and I nervously explained my vision, the struggles I had faced, and how my platform could solve a real problem for small business owners. The investor seemed genuinely interested and asked insightful questions about the product and my plans for scaling. A week later, he offered me a small seed investment to help me upgrade the platform and hire a team. With the investment in hand, I was able to hire a couple of developers and a designer. We worked tirelessly over the next few months, refining the platform, adding new features, and making it more scalable. The product started to improve, and so did the customer base. We added more payment integrations, improved the UI/UX, and expanded our marketing efforts to reach a wider audience. It wasn't just about building the tool anymore. It was about building a brand that small businesses could trust. Things started to gain real momentum. We grew our user base significantly, and the feedback we received was overwhelmingly positive. We created a community of small business owners who shared tips and ideas for using the platform, and they began referring us to others. I went from being an overworked freelancer to being the CEO of a growing tech company. We raised additional funding, expanded the team, and eventually turned our platform into a subscription-based service. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. There were so many moments when I doubted myself, when I thought I was in over my head, but every challenge was an opportunity to learn and grow. I learned that entrepreneurship isn't about having the perfect idea from the start, but about the ability to adapt, pivot, and keep pushing forward. I didn't start with connections or money, but I had passion and grit, and that carried me through. Today, my company serves thousands of small businesses, and we continue to innovate and expand. We've recently launched a mobile app, and I'm already thinking about the next big project. But I'll never forget the struggle of those early days, the sleepless nights, the uncertainty, and the feeling of being alone in the journey. It's been the hardest but most rewarding thing I've ever done. If you're reading this and thinking about starting your own business, my advice is simple. Just start. You don't need all the answers or a perfect plan. What you need is the willingness to fail, learn, and keep going. The road is never easy, but if you stick with it, it will be worth it. And remember, the hardest times often lead to the biggest breakthroughs. Hey, friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. In the fall of 2017, I was a freshman at a small university in Ohio. I had a decent scholarship and was doing okay in school, but there was a growing sense of dissatisfaction within me. I was studying business, but the more I learned in class, the less it felt like it applied to real life. Everyone around me seemed to be following the typical path: graduate, get a job, work 9 to 5, repeat. But that just wasn't for me. I wanted to create something of my own. So I started researching ways to make money online. I had no experience with business, but I knew the internet had opened up opportunities for people to start ventures with little to no capital. After countless nights of reading articles, watching YouTube videos, and browsing forums, I decided to try my hand at dropshipping. For those who don't know, dropshipping is a retail fulfillment method where you don't keep products in stock. Instead, when a customer buys something from your store, you purchase the item from a third party, and they ship it directly to the customer. All you need is an online storefront and a supplier willing to handle fulfillment. I spent the next few weeks learning how to set up a store on Shopify, finding suppliers on AliExpress, and designing my website. I had a few $100s saved up from working part-time in high school, and I used most of that to set up the basics. It wasn't much, but I was determined to make it work. I spent every free moment I had building the business between classes and studying for exams. I launched my first store with a focus on selling phone accessories. It wasn't glamorous, but it was something I thought people would buy. The first few weeks were disheartening. I ran ads, I posted on social media, and I did everything the gurus on YouTube recommended. But nothing happened. 0 sales. I'll admit, I was close to giving up after the first month. My confidence was shot, and I thought maybe I just wasn't cut out for this. But I took a step back and reevaluated everything. I realized I had made a ton of mistakes. I didn't know my audience. I didn't know how to market properly, and most importantly, I hadn't truly understood the product I was selling. So, I scrapped that store and started over with a new niche: fitness gear. This time, I decided to take a more thoughtful approach. I spent weeks researching the fitness market, analyzing competitors, and understanding what customers were actually looking for. I even began engaging with fitness communities on Reddit and Instagram to get a better sense of their pain points and preferences. My goal wasn't to just sell a product. I wanted to build a brand that people would trust. I launched my new store with a curated collection of high-quality yoga mats, resistance bands, and other workout accessories. The difference this time was that I didn't just throw up a website and hope for the best. I had a brand story, a solid marketing plan, and a clear value proposition. But even then, it wasn't an overnight success. The first couple of months were still tough. I wasn't getting the traffic I needed, and the sales were few and far between. But I was learning. I learned how to run Facebook and Instagram ads more effectively. I learned about the power of influencer marketing and started reaching out to small fitness influencers to collaborate with. Slowly but surely, the store started to gain traction. In March of 2018, I got my first significant sale, an order worth $200. To most, it might not seem like much, but to me, it was a massive victory. It meant that my efforts weren't in vain. From that point on, I reinvested every penny I made back into the business. I hired a freelance graphic designer to make my website look more professional. I paid for courses on SEO and digital marketing. I started to refine my ads to target specific audiences more effectively. By the summer of 2019, I was making around $5,000 a month in revenue, and I had moved into a small apartment off campus to avoid distractions. The next step was scaling. I hired a part-time assistant to help with customer service and order fulfillment, which freed me up to focus on marketing and product development. The turning point came when I launched a new product line, customized gym bags. I spent months researching suppliers who could deliver quality bags that could be personalized. The initial response was lukewarm, but when I ran a limited-time promotion offering a free custom name embroidery, sales exploded. It wasn't just the product itself, but the emotional connection people had with it. I tapped into a niche market of people who wanted personalized fitness gear, and the response was overwhelming. Fast forward to 2021, and my e-commerce store had exploded into a seven-figure business. I was no longer just a college student trying to make extra cash. I had built a full-fledged brand with a loyal customer base. We had expanded our product line, and we had a growing team of 10 employees working remotely. My brand had earned the trust of hundreds of thousands of customers worldwide, and I was even able to invest in other ventures. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were challenges, supply chain issues, competitors copying my products, and burnout. I made my fair share of mistakes along the way, but each setback taught me something valuable. In 2023, I decided to take the company to the next level by launching a subscription model for our fitness products, offering exclusive discounts and early access to new products for members. The response was phenomenal, and the business grew even faster. Now, as I look back on my journey, I can't believe how far I've come. There were times when I thought I wasn't going to make it, and there were times when I wanted to quit, but pushing through those moments is what got me here. If you're thinking about starting a business, my advice is simple: just start. You'll make mistakes, you'll struggle, but you'll learn and grow. The key is to stay persistent, learn from every experience, and always adapt. As I write this, my business is generating 7 figures a year, and I've built a brand that I'm truly proud of. It wasn't easy, but it was worth every late night and every ounce of effort. The journey has been long, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. So if you're sitting on an idea, feeling hesitant, just know that it's possible. With determination and a willingness to learn from your failures, you can create something truly meaningful. Now, I'm more focused than ever on growing my business and helping others who want to start their own entrepreneurial journey. If I can do it, so can you. I never thought I would become an entrepreneur. Growing up, I was always the type of person who wanted a steady job, something reliable. My family had always emphasized education and job security. I studied hard in school, went to a good university, and landed a job at a well-known tech company. Everything seemed to be going according to plan until one day, everything changed. It was in the middle of 2015 when I first started thinking about entrepreneurship. I had been working at my desk job for a couple of years, and while the work was challenging, I was growing increasingly dissatisfied. The office politics were draining, my ideas felt stifled, and I found myself wondering whether there was more to life than this predictable routine. But, like most people, I never thought I had what it took to break out of the system. I wasn't a risk taker, and I had no experience in running a business. Then came the aha moment. It wasn't a flash of genius or a sudden epiphany, but rather a slow realization after a series of unfortunate events. One day, I received an email at work saying that our department was being downsized due to budget cuts. It wasn't a huge surprise, but the timing was particularly tough. I was in the middle of a project I was passionate about, and suddenly, I was told I might lose my job. It was a wake-up call. I spent the next couple of weeks trying to find another job, but I realized how competitive the job market had become. I was competing with a ton of other skilled professionals, many of whom had more experience than me. Despite having a degree from a prestigious university, I started to feel like I was stuck in a never-ending cycle of applying, interviewing, and hoping for a chance. It was then that I stumbled across a podcast about entrepreneurship. The host interviewed everyday people who had taken the plunge and started their own businesses. Some were successful, some had failed, but all of them were living on their own terms. It was inspiring, and for the first time in a while, I felt like I could do something different. But the question remained, what could I possibly do? I didn't have any standout skills beyond tech, and I didn't have a ton of capital to invest in a business idea. I didn't know much about marketing, finance, or product development. I had no idea how to get started, but I knew one thing for sure. I had to try. I started by researching small businesses and entrepreneurs who had started with very little. I scoured Reddit threads, YouTube videos, and articles. I even reached out to people who had started successful online businesses, asking for advice. The more I learned, the more I realized that starting small was the key. You didn't have to launch a huge company from the get-go. You could start with a simple idea and grow it over time. But what was that idea? At the time, I was obsessed with fitness. I had been working out regularly for years and loved learning about nutrition and exercise. I had even helped a few friends with workout plans and advice. It was during one of those conversations that the light bulb went off. Why not create an online platform to help people with fitness? The market was huge, but most platforms felt impersonal and overly complicated. I could offer something simple and direct, a place for people to get personalized fitness plans without the fluff. It sounded crazy, but I decided to give it a shot. I began by creating a website, using my tech skills to build a simple platform that allowed users to input their fitness goals and preferences. I worked on the website late into the nights, perfecting the user experience, researching fitness programs, and building up content. I didn't have a team, just me, my computer, and a ton of YouTube tutorials. The more I worked on it, the more I felt like I was building something real. I had no budget for marketing, so I turned to social media. I started posting workout tips on Instagram and YouTube, sharing my journey of building a business from scratch. Slowly, people started to take notice. At first, it was just a handful of likes and comments from friends and family, but over time, the audience grew. I received messages from people who were genuinely interested in the platform I was creating. They liked the simplicity and the personal touch of the fitness plans. Some even signed up for the service, which was a huge win for me. But things weren't easy. There were weeks when I felt like giving up. I was working full-time and running the business on the side, so I barely had time to sleep. I made plenty of mistakes along the way, whether it was underpricing my services, making technical errors on the website, or failing to properly manage my time. But the important part was that I kept going. I kept improving, learning from my mistakes, and adapting. As the business started to gain traction, I realized that I couldn't do it all on my own anymore. I was burning out, and my day job was still demanding. So, in 2017, I made a bold decision. I quit my job to focus on my business full-time. It was terrifying. There was no safety net, and the future was uncertain. But deep down, I knew I had to take the leap. The next few months were a blur of work. I hired a small team, mostly remote contractors, to help with content creation, marketing, and customer support. I invested in advertising and focused on growing my brand. The business slowly grew, and by the end of 2018, I was making more money from my business than I had ever made in my corporate job. But it wasn't just about the money. It was the freedom, the creativity, and the ability to make decisions that truly mattered to me. In 2019, I scaled the business further. We introduced new features like one-on-one coaching, group challenges, and expanded to international markets. Our platform gained a reputation for being one of the most user-friendly fitness platforms on the market, and the word-of-mouth referrals were incredible. We went from a small operation with just a few hundred users to a community of over 50,000 people in just a couple of years. Now, in 2025, the business is thriving. We're profitable, and we've even started offering additional services like meal planning and mental health coaching. I have a talented team that I trust, and we're constantly innovating. We're not perfect. There are still challenges, but we've come a long way from those early days when I was sitting alone in my apartment, trying to figure out how to launch a fitness platform. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. I still remember the days when I was terrified to take the leap. I've learned that success isn't about avoiding failure. It's about learning from it and pushing through when it gets tough. Entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart, but if you truly believe in your idea and you're willing to put in the work, it can be one of the most rewarding experiences of your life. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Don't be afraid to start small, to fail, or to ask for help. You don't need to have it all figured out from the start. You just need to take that first step. The rest will follow. I've always had the dream of owning my own business, but I didn't come from money. I grew up in a small town where the idea of starting a business seemed like something only the rich or lucky could do. However, my perspective on what was possible began to shift when I was in college. I was a broke student living off ramen noodles and the occasional meal from a kind friend. Most of my time was spent working part-time jobs to cover rent and tuition, but I always kept an eye out for opportunities. I'd see people around me, especially on social media, talking about their side hustles, selling products online, or running small online businesses, and I thought, why not me? Why couldn't I try it too? The first attempt at entrepreneurship came when I saw an ad for a dropshipping course. I'd heard about it before, but never really took it seriously. That's when I decided to dive in. I scraped together a couple $100, bought a course, and set up my first store. The course promised that I could make thousands in a month, but reality hit hard. The store launched, and I waited. And waited. No sales. Not a single one. The store was a disaster. I didn't know anything about marketing or targeting an audience, and the products I was selling weren't even that unique. After several weeks, I shut it down, feeling like I'd wasted time and money. But it didn't break me. It motivated me to keep learning. I decided to shift gears and try selling on Amazon. The idea of creating a private label product seemed like a more tangible path to success. I spent weeks researching products, reading reviews, checking out forums, and trying to figure out what would sell. I landed on a simple product, a set of reusable grocery bags. The product wasn't revolutionary, but I figured it was eco-friendly, practical, and fit with the growing trend of sustainability. I found a supplier in China, ordered a small batch, and waited. When the products arrived, I was excited. I thought I'd hit a gold mine. But reality soon slapped me again. Listing my bags on Amazon didn't do anything. There was no magic. I wasn't getting sales, and I didn't know how to market the product or stand out among the thousands of other sellers. The listing was buried, and the reviews were slow to come in. After a few months of minimal sales, I was losing money, and I considered quitting again. But something in me pushed forward. I figured out that in order to succeed, I needed to learn about Amazon's algorithm and marketing. I pored over Amazon seller forums and read everything I could about SEO, search engine optimization for Amazon. I revamped my listing, improved the photos, and worked on getting better reviews from customers. Then, I invested in some paid ads on Amazon, targeting the right audience. Within a month, the sales started rolling in. It wasn't huge at first, but it was enough to cover my costs and give me a sense of validation. For the first time, I was making money without working a 9-to-5 job. I took a step back and realized that the hard work was paying off, but it wasn't just luck. It was the result of learning from my failures, adapting, and applying what I had learned. I used the profits from my small success to reinvest in more inventory, better marketing, and expanding my product line. Over the next year, my business slowly started growing. I added a few new products that complemented the reusable bags, like foldable shopping carts and produce bags. The key to my growth was continually improving my product listings, listening to customer feedback, and making adjustments. As my Amazon business began to scale, I started looking for ways to diversify. I knew relying solely on one platform wasn't the safest bet, so I began building my own website and running Facebook ads. At first, the website didn't bring in many sales, but it gave me the chance to brand myself outside of Amazon, which was something I was missing. During this time, I also learned the importance of customer service. I realized that a single upset customer could cause negative reviews, which would hurt my rankings and sales. I went above and beyond to make sure every customer was happy. If someone left a negative review, I would reach out and resolve the issue immediately, often offering a refund or a replacement product. This approach helped me build a loyal customer base that trusted me. Fast forward to the end of my third year in business, and things were finally clicking. My revenue had grown exponentially, and I'd reached a point where I was making enough to quit my part-time jobs. I had moved out of the tiny apartment I was living in and into a house that I could finally call my own. The sense of freedom was incredible, but it was also overwhelming. I had employees, inventory, and orders coming in constantly. I had to learn how to manage everything and still keep growing. I hired a small team to handle customer service, marketing, and fulfillment, but I kept the creative side of the business to myself. By the end of year 5, my company had expanded into international markets. I had launched on multiple e-commerce platforms, including Walmart and eBay, and I was generating 6 figures in annual revenue. It wasn't easy, and there were plenty of sleepless nights, but I had built something from nothing, and that feeling was indescribable. I'd like to say it was all smooth sailing after that, but growth brought its own set of challenges. International expansion came with new logistics issues, cultural differences in marketing, and language barriers. I had to navigate customs and international shipping, which was a huge headache. But with time, I found a reliable third-party logistics provider who helped streamline the process, and things began to run more smoothly. By year 6, I began thinking about the future. I didn't want to just be another seller on Amazon. I wanted to create a brand that people trusted and recognized. I invested in professional branding and packaging, and we started focusing more on creating a lifestyle around our products. We weren't just selling bags and eco-friendly products anymore. We were promoting a lifestyle of sustainability, which was something that resonated deeply with consumers. My business continued to grow, and in my 7th year, I decided it was time to scale further. I launched a subscription box for eco-friendly products, which became incredibly popular. This allowed me to build a stronger community around my brand and provide customers with new, curated products each month. It was a new revenue stream that helped solidify the business even further. Today, my company is thriving. I've had the chance to mentor other aspiring entrepreneurs and even invest in a few startups. I've learned that success doesn't come overnight. It's a constant process of learning, adapting, and pushing forward, even when the odds seem stacked against you. If I'd given up after my first failure, or even after my second or third, I wouldn't be where I am today. For anyone reading this who's thinking about starting their own business, don't give up. It will be hard. You will fail, and you will lose money. But if you keep learning and growing from those failures, you'll eventually find the path that works for you. It won't happen in a month or a year, but with persistence and resilience, anything is possible. I'm living proof of that. I started my journey as an entrepreneur with nothing but a handful of ideas and a burning desire to prove myself. I was 22, fresh out of college, and living in a small apartment in a city that was constantly buzzing with energy. I had the usual ambitions, owning a business, creating something meaningful, and ultimately building a life I could be proud of. But at the time, I had no real direction. I had a degree in marketing, but no idea what I was supposed to do with it. After graduation, I took a job at a small tech startup. It wasn't my dream job, but it paid the bills and, more importantly, gave me insight into how companies operated on the inside. I wasn't there for long, about a year, to be exact. During that time, I watched the founders struggle with growth and the complexities of scaling their business. I saw the mistakes they made, the opportunities they missed, and I thought to myself, I could do this better. One day, while sitting at my desk, I had an epiphany. I was working on a marketing campaign for a client when I realized that the strategy one was using for them could easily be adapted to other niches. It was simple, yet effective, but no one seemed to be doing it in a scalable way. I had a flash of inspiration. What if I could build a business that offered these marketing strategies to small businesses? What if I could help others grow by applying the same principles I had seen work in my own company? So, I quit my job. There was no backup plan, no safety net, just a leap of faith. I used the small savings I had accumulated over the past year and decided to go all in on this idea. I didn't know exactly what I was doing, but I figured if I didn't try, I would always wonder what could have been. I called my business Smart Growth Strategies. The name was simple, but it conveyed exactly what I wanted to offer: smart, sustainable growth for small businesses. I set up a website, created social media profiles, and started reaching out to small business owners, offering free consultations. My goal wasn't to make money immediately. I wanted to build a portfolio, get some testimonials, and learn as much as I could about what made businesses succeed or fail. The first few months were rough. I was working 16-hour days, learning how to design my website, writing blog posts, crafting email campaigns, and cold calling every local business I could find. I didn't have any real clients yet, but I was persistent. My first client came from a small coffee shop down the street. I had been in there several times, chatting with the owner about his marketing struggles. One day, he finally said, "Okay, let's see what you can do." That was the moment everything changed. I went all in for that coffee shop. I spent weeks researching their competitors, analyzing their target market, and crafting a marketing plan. I revamped their social media profiles, redesigned their website, and helped them with email campaigns. Slowly but surely, we saw results. The shop's sales grew, their foot traffic increased, and their brand presence grew stronger. The owner was ecstatic, and so was I. He referred me to other business owners in the area, and just like that, I had a snowball effect. The next 2 years were a blur. I went from 1 client to 5, then from 5 to 10. My revenue was growing, But I was still doing everything myself: client consultations, marketing campaigns, design, and admin work. I had no employees, no systems in place, and I was working nonstop. I had this vision of what my business could be, but I was running on fumes. The stress was starting to take a toll on my personal life. My friends would ask me to hang out, but I'd always say no. I had no time for anything other than work. And even when I was with my family, I was checking emails and writing proposals. After a particularly exhausting week, I realized something had to change. If I wanted to scale this business, I couldn't keep doing everything myself. So, I hired my first employee, a virtual assistant, who could handle administrative tasks while I focused on the high-level strategies. It was a game changer. With more time to focus on what really mattered, I was able to take on more clients, improve my services, and streamline my processes. A few months later, I hired a small team of marketers and designers to help with the growing demand. We started creating more sophisticated campaigns, offering paid ads, SEO, content marketing, and even video production. The business was growing faster than I could have imagined, but I still had doubts. Was I really cut out to run a company? I had no formal business training, and there were times when I felt like I was faking it. But I pushed through those moments of self-doubt. I read books, took online courses, and sought advice from other entrepreneurs. Slowly, I learned how to manage a team, delegate tasks, and improve the customer experience. I also started focusing more on branding and positioning. Instead of just offering generic marketing services, we began positioning ourselves as experts in helping businesses scale sustainably. By year 3, we were bringing in 6 figures in revenue. Our clients included local retailers, online stores, and even a few larger businesses looking for fresh marketing strategies. We had a solid reputation, a growing portfolio, and a steady stream of leads coming in. But despite all of this success, I still felt something was missing. That's when I realized I wasn't just running a business, I was building a lifestyle. The freedom I had once craved was now within my grasp. I didn't need to chase clients anymore. They were coming to us. I was working with a team I trusted, and I was able to take time off when I needed it. But more importantly, I had created something that had value, not just to me, but to the clients we served. Fast forward to today, and Smart Growth Strategies is thriving. We've expanded to work with clients from all over the country and even internationally. We've grown to a team of 25 people, each passionate about helping small businesses grow. The hustle is still there, but it's different now. It's sustainable. Looking back, I realized that my journey was never about the money or the fame. It was about the constant growth, learning from my failures, evolving as a leader, and building something that not only supports my family, but also provides value to others. I've learned that success doesn't happen overnight, and that's okay. It's the day-to-day grind that leads to the big wins. So, to anyone thinking about taking that leap into entrepreneurship, do it. But be prepared. It's not glamorous. It's not easy. And there will be days when you question why you started. But if you keep going, keep learning, and keep improving, it's worth it. The path is long, but the rewards are real. I was 23 when I decided to quit my stable job and take the leap into entrepreneurship. It was an odd decision, especially considering that my job at a tech firm wasn't bad. I had decent pay, great coworkers, and benefits. But something inside me felt restless. I had this burning idea, a vision, something that seemed so simple but seemed to hold the potential to change my life forever. I wanted to create an online platform for local businesses to advertise directly to consumers with the ease of a click, the kind of service that would allow even the smallest mom-and-pop stores to compete with the big players. Looking back now, I realize how naive I was at that time. But you have to start somewhere, right? It all started on a late Friday night. I was in my tiny one-bedroom apartment in the city, scrolling through social media, frustrated with the barrage of generic ads I was being fed. Ads for the same big-name companies, the same products, everywhere. I wondered why there wasn't a space where local businesses could show up in front of their target audience directly without competing with millions of dollars worth of marketing budgets. That's when the idea hit me. Create a digital marketplace that connects local businesses directly to customers who are within a certain radius of them. The platform would be simple. Businesses could create their profiles, upload their offerings, and advertise to people who were in their immediate vicinity. It was like a hyperlocal Yelp, but with ads that were dynamic and tailored. The idea was so clear and easy to understand in my head that I thought it would be a piece of cake to launch. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. I spent the next few weeks putting together a rough draft of my business plan. I wanted to launch in a small city first, where I could test the idea and see if it even worked. I called up a few friends who were in the tech industry and asked for their thoughts. Some of them thought it was an interesting concept, but most weren't as enthusiastic. They pointed out the challenges. Local businesses don't always embrace tech. There's a high failure rate for startups, and it's incredibly hard to scale. But none of that discouraged me. It only fueled my fire to prove them wrong. The first thing I needed to do was build a website. I had a basic understanding of HTML and CSS from college, so I figured I could build the first version myself. My evenings were spent hunched over my laptop, learning how to code and building the website from scratch. I wanted it to look sleek, but simple enough for a small business owner with no tech skills to understand. After 2 months of sleepless nights, the site was ready. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. I was excited, and at that point, I didn't care how it looked. I just wanted to get started. I pitched it to a few local businesses in my area and offered them free listings for the first few months. The feedback was mixed. Some were intrigued, but most were hesitant. "We already have a Facebook page," one owner said. "Why do we need another platform?" That was a tough pill to swallow. My idea was starting to feel like a long shot. But I didn't give up. I kept pushing, trying to get more businesses on board. The idea wasn't as clear to them as it had been to me. The problem was that many small business owners don't have the time or patience to try something new when they're already so busy just keeping the lights on. The next few months were a blur of phone calls, emails, and meetings with local businesses, none of which seemed to convert into anything substantial. Then, just when I thought I might be on the verge of giving up, something unexpected happened. One of the businesses that had signed up for the free listing, the owner of a small bakery, reached out to tell me that she had gotten more foot traffic and online orders than ever before. "I don't know what you did," she said, "but it's working." That was the breakthrough moment. I realized that if I could prove the concept to one business, I could do it for others too. With renewed energy, I began fine-tuning the platform. I made it easier to use, added more marketing features for businesses, and started building relationships with local influencers to promote the platform. Slowly but surely, more businesses began signing up. However, it wasn't without setbacks. One of the biggest hurdles was the technical side of things. I didn't have enough experience to build a truly scalable product, and the platform kept crashing as more users signed up. I couldn't afford to hire developers at that point, so I learned to work with freelance coders who could help me patch up the website, which was a costly but necessary investment. Each time there was a new bug, I felt like I was going to lose everything I had worked so hard for. But with every failure, I learned more. The bakery owner's success story gave me the confidence I needed to pitch the platform to larger businesses in the area, and eventually, more business owners saw the value. It wasn't just about advertising. It was about creating a community. I wanted to build something that helped businesses grow without having to compete with national brands that could outspend them by millions. The first year was a constant battle. Some months, I barely made any money at all. Other months, I barely made enough to cover my rent. But I kept pushing forward. The turning point came when I secured a partnership with a local chamber of commerce. They saw the value in what I was trying to do, and their endorsement helped me reach more business owners. That partnership opened doors I didn't know existed. It's been 5 years since I first launched my platform, and while it's far from perfect, I'm proud of what I've built. The website now serves hundreds of local businesses, and it's growing at a steady pace. I've managed to expand to a few other cities, and the revenue from subscriptions has allowed me to hire a small team. It's still a struggle at times. There are always challenges and setbacks, but I've learned to embrace those moments as part of the process. If you're thinking about starting your own business, I'd say this: don't let fear hold you back, but don't be naive either. There will be times when you feel like giving up, and there will be moments where you feel like a failure. But if you stick with it, learn from your mistakes, and keep pushing forward, you might just find success in places you never expected. In the end, I learned that the most important thing is to keep moving. Success isn't about hitting it big right away. It's about incremental progress, one step at a time. And that's how you build something that lasts. I grew up in a small town in the Midwest. My parents were hard workers. My dad was a mechanic, and my mom worked 2 jobs to help make ends meet. We weren't poor, but we weren't exactly living the high life either. I remember my mom always telling me to never settle for just getting by, that I should aim for more. She'd say, "You don't have to be rich, but you have to be smart with what you've got." The words stuck with me, even when I didn't fully understand them. Fast forward to my early 20s, and I found myself working in a dead-end retail job, not much different from what my parents had warned me about. It wasn't that I didn't like the work. I actually didn't mind it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was meant for something bigger. I didn't know what, exactly, but I knew I couldn't keep punching in and out forever. I had always been the type to tinker with things. Whether it was fixing old bikes, building small gadgets, or messing with electronics, I was constantly creating. So, I thought, why not take that curiosity and turn it into something? I started small. I saved up a couple of $1,000s, enough to buy some tools, raw materials, and a bit of marketing to kick off a side business. I didn't know the first thing about entrepreneurship, but I figured I'd learn as I went. The first idea was simple custom phone cases. There was a small market for them, but I quickly learned it wasn't going to be a gold mine. The cases I made were nice, but they didn't stand out enough to make a real impact. I was barely breaking even, and I started to doubt myself. Was I just throwing money into a black hole? But I wasn't ready to give up yet. A few months into this venture, I decided to pivot. I took a step back and thought about the things I really enjoyed creating, and then I asked myself, what do people actually need? It wasn't just about what I wanted to make, it had to solve a problem. That's when it hit me. People hate losing their keys. It's such a simple thing, but it's a daily frustration for so many. So, I decided to create a smart key tracker, a small, Bluetooth-enabled device that you could attach to your keys, and if you lost them, you could find them with an app on your phone. I didn't know anything about Bluetooth technology, so I spent countless hours reading articles, watching YouTube videos, and reaching out to experts. I felt overwhelmed but excited at the same time. I had this vision of what I wanted to create, but the technical side of it was completely foreign to me. Still, I kept pushing through, researching the components I needed and finding a local engineer who could help me with the design. The prototype was terrible. It looked like something a high schooler would throw together during science class. But it worked. The key tracker actually worked. The first time I used it to find my lost keys, I nearly cried. It was like I had solved a personal problem and could now share it with the world. I launched a crowdfunding campaign to fund the production of the key tracker. At first, it barely got any attention. But then, slowly, word started spreading. A few influencers picked it up, and people started posting about it online. The momentum was slow, but it was there. By the end of the campaign, I had raised enough money to start mass production. I still remember the moment when the first batch of key trackers arrived. I had to borrow a small storage unit to keep them, but it felt surreal to see my idea physically manifest. It was like the culmination of everything I had worked for. I spent hours packaging each order, writing personal thank you notes to customers, and shipping them out myself. It was exhausting but exhilarating. Sales were modest at first, but they grew steadily. I used the profits to reinvest in the business, improving the product, building a website, and launching more advertising campaigns. It wasn't a straight line to success. There were so many bumps along the way. The first batch of trackers had a defect that caused a lot of frustration for early customers. That set me back a bit, but I handled it head-on. I apologized to every person who had an issue, fixed the problem, and sent them new products. It wasn't cheap, but it was necessary. At the time, I didn't realize how important customer service would be for the long-term success of my business. But people appreciated the effort, and it paid off. Slowly but surely, I started seeing growth. Within a year, I had quit my retail job and was working full-time on my business. The freedom was incredible, but it came with its own set of challenges. I was responsible for everything: marketing, product development, customer service, and accounting. It was a lot for one person to handle, but I was willing to do whatever it took to keep the momentum going. Eventually, I reached a point where I had to decide whether to scale up or stay small. I could see that the market for smart accessories was growing, but I didn't want to get lost in the noise. So, I decided to expand the product line, adding smart wallets, smart bags, and even a smart pet collar. Each product solved a different problem, but they all followed the same philosophy: make life easier with technology. But scaling up came with new risks. I needed a team to help handle everything, and I also needed to find ways to stand out in an increasingly competitive market. I hired a small group of people to help with marketing, development, and customer support. It was amazing to see my little business grow, but it was also a constant balancing act. There were moments when I wondered if I had bitten off more than I could chew, but then I'd remember why I started in the first place: to create something that solved a problem for people, to make life just a little bit easier. That kept me going. Today, the company has grown into a small but successful tech accessory brand. We've shipped thousands of products all over the world, and our customers continue to rave about how our products have helped them in their daily lives. I don't take credit for all of it, though. The success is a result of a lot of hard work, support from a great team, and, most importantly, customers who believed in the idea and stuck with me through the rough patches. Looking back, I realize how far I've come since I started tinkering with gadgets in my small apartment. I still remember the days of doubt and uncertainty, wondering if it would ever work. But now, when I look at the company, I know that every risk, every sleepless night, and every failure was worth it. And to this day, I remember my mom's words. She was right. I didn't need to be rich, but I needed to be smart with what I had. That lesson has stuck with me every step of the way. I started my journey with nothing but a broken laptop and an idea. It was 2015, and I was just another college dropout living in my mom's basement. I had a knack for digital marketing, but nothing more than a handful of odd freelance gigs under my belt. My family didn't understand why I didn't go back to school and get a real job. They were always pushing me to just get a 9 to 5 and make something of myself. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was destined to do something more, something on my terms. It all began with a personal blog I started about tech reviews. I loved technology, gadgets, and anything related to the digital world, and I thought, why not combine that passion with my ability to market? So, I bought a domain, set up a website on WordPress, and started writing. The first few months were rough. I posted 1 or 2 articles a week, spent hours perfecting each one, and barely saw any traffic. My friends and family didn't get it. They said I was wasting my time, but I didn't care. I saw small wins every time I noticed a new visitor to the site, even if it was just one a day. I spent hours studying SEO and learning about affiliate marketing. By the time 2016 rolled around, I had learned enough to start promoting products through affiliate links. I wasn't making much, but it was something. Fast forward to 2017. My blog started to get some traction. I had grown my traffic to about 5,000 monthly visitors. I wasn't rich by any means, but I was finally earning a few $100s a month. Then came a big turning point. I found out that the affiliate networks I was using were taking a huge chunk of the commission. Some took as much as 50%. That's when I realized I needed to cut out the middleman. I made a bold decision. I would start my own tech product. I had no clue how to manufacture anything, but I knew how to market. I partnered with a manufacturer overseas to create a custom phone case. My blog had a decent following at that point, so I thought, why not leverage it to sell my own product? It wasn't a perfect plan, but I was desperate. The first batch was small, just 500 units, but I was determined to make it work. I spent every spare moment working on the product launch. I designed the website, crafted a detailed marketing campaign, and created all the content myself. I even recorded unboxing videos to post on YouTube. The goal was simple: build hype, attract buyers, and sell out the initial inventory. The launch came, and I sold 10 units the first day. My heart sank. It wasn't exactly a roaring success, but instead of wallowing in self-pity, I doubled down. I spent the next month tweaking the website, reaching out to influencers, and refining the marketing. Slowly but surely, sales started to pick up. By the end of the month, I had sold all 500 units. It wasn't a fortune, but it was proof of concept. I had built something from scratch. The real breakthrough came in 2018. I had saved up enough from my blog and my product sales to hire my first employee, a marketing specialist. Her job was simple: help me scale. We worked day and night to refine our strategies and improve our products. We even started experimenting with different types of products, from phone cases to charging cables, and expanded our reach to Amazon. Slowly, our customer base grew, and I began to see real revenue from my efforts. I won't lie, it wasn't easy. There were months where I thought about quitting. The stress of managing inventory, customer service, and marketing was overwhelming. But every time I hit a wall, I reminded myself that I had nothing to go back to. I wasn't going back to school or taking a desk job. I had committed to this journey, and I was determined to see it through. By the time 2019 came around, my business had grown significantly. I was no longer just selling phone cases. I had expanded into tech accessories like wireless chargers, Bluetooth speakers, and smart home devices. The blog was now an established brand in the tech niche, and I was generating consistent revenue every month. We had a small team of 5 people, and things were moving in the right direction. Then came the hardest part of all, scaling. The market was becoming increasingly competitive, and I knew that in order to stand out, I needed to pivot. I needed to create something that no one else was doing. I started looking at emerging technologies like smart wearables and AR/VR. After months of research and development, we launched a smart fitness band, a simple concept, but one that I believed could change the market. I spent everything I had on the development of the fitness band, and when we finally launched in 2020, it was a gamble. We went all in. I leveraged my blog and social media to generate buzz, and within a month, we had sold 10,000 units. I couldn't believe it. It was the success I had been dreaming of. But it didn't come without challenges. The supply chain issues caused by the pandemic were brutal, and we had to scramble to find alternative suppliers. But we managed to keep things afloat, and the fitness band became a huge hit. In 2021, I was able to expand further. I opened my first office, hired more employees, and took the company to a whole new level. We went from selling products online to partnering with retail chains, and our customer base grew exponentially. The fitness band was no longer just a side project. It had become the face of our brand. By 2023, the company had hit $20 million in revenue. I never imagined I would get to this point. It was surreal to think that just a few years ago, I was living in my mom's basement, scraping by with freelance work and blogging. Now, I had a full-fledged business with hundreds of employees, multiple product lines, and partnerships with some of the biggest tech companies in the world. Looking back, the road to success wasn't linear. There were so many times I wanted to quit, and so many times I felt like I was in over my head. But through perseverance, a bit of luck, and a whole lot of learning, I built something that I'm proud of. Today, I'm still involved in every aspect of the business, but I also take time to give back. I mentor young entrepreneurs who are where I once was, and I'm constantly trying to learn more and grow. If there's one thing I've learned through this entire journey, it's this. If you have the drive and the passion, you can make something out of nothing. Don't listen to the doubters, don't let setbacks define you, and always remember that success doesn't happen overnight. It's a marathon, not a sprint. This is the story of how I turned a passion project into a full-time business, how I took a simple idea from my garage and turned it into a successful e-commerce brand. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when I seriously questioned whether I could pull it off. But looking back now, it was all worth it. Here's how it happened. It all started about 4 years ago. I was working a 9-to-5 job in marketing, and while I was grateful for the stability, I felt stuck. I had this nagging feeling that I was wasting my potential, that there was more to life than just clocking in every day. I had always been a creative person, and my mind was constantly filled with ideas. But I didn't have the guts to pursue any of them seriously. Until one day, I had a conversation with a friend that completely changed my perspective. My friend was talking about her own side hustle, and it sparked something in me. I had always been interested in woodworking, but it was just a hobby I did on weekends. I made small projects like furniture and home decor, but never considered it could be more than just something I did for fun. After that conversation, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Could I turn my hobby into a business? Could I make a living from something I was passionate about? I started researching the idea of selling handmade furniture online. There was a market for it, but it was incredibly competitive. Big companies had already cornered the market. But what if I could carve out a niche for myself by focusing on quality, custom designs, and a personalized experience? The idea felt right, but I knew it would take a lot of effort to stand out in such a crowded space. The first step was to build a portfolio. I started working on custom pieces, using materials I hadn't worked with before. I wanted to push myself and create unique, high-quality designs that would set me apart from other makers. I posted my projects on Instagram, even though I didn't have many followers at the time. I also started reaching out to people in local communities to get feedback and improve my designs. The response was overwhelming. People were interested in my work, and a few even reached out for commissions. I felt like I might actually have something here. The next step was launching a website. I had no idea how to build a website, but I was determined to learn. I spent days watching YouTube tutorials, reading articles, and experimenting with different website builders. After a couple of weeks, I finally had a simple but functional site up and running. I started adding my custom designs, along with detailed descriptions and pricing. But I knew just having a website wasn't enough. I needed to drive traffic to it, which meant marketing. I started learning everything I could about digital marketing, SEO, social media ads, influencer marketing. I knew I needed to build my brand and get the word out. At first, it was a lot of trial and error. I ran Facebook ads that didn't perform well, and I tried different Instagram strategies that didn't give me the results I was hoping for. But slowly, I started figuring out what worked for my niche. I refined my messaging and began creating content that spoke directly to the types of customers I wanted to attract. Over time, the website started getting more traffic, and sales began to trickle in. Then, just when I thought things were starting to go smoothly, I faced a major setback. I had invested a significant amount of money into materials and tools, and I had taken out a small loan to help with the costs. But the business was still in its infancy, and I wasn't generating enough revenue to cover my expenses. I was facing cash flow issues, and it felt like everything was going to crash down around me. I remember sitting in my garage, looking at the piles of wood and unfinished projects, wondering if I had made a huge mistake. I didn't know what to do. I reached out to a few mentors I had made connections with through online woodworking communities. One of them gave me some tough love and told me that running a business was all about finding creative solutions to problems. You can't quit just because things are hard, they said. Every successful business goes through rough patches. You just have to keep pushing. Their words stuck with me, and I realized I had two choices: give up or find a way to make it work. I chose the latter. I started cutting costs wherever I could. I found cheaper suppliers for my materials and started looking for creative ways to streamline my production process. I also doubled down on marketing. I invested in more targeted Facebook ads and reached out to influencers in the home decor space for collaborations. Slowly, things began to improve. The sales started to increase, and I was finally able to pay off the loan. As my brand grew, I realized I needed help. I couldn't do everything myself. So, I hired my first employee, someone who could assist with production and help me manage orders. This was a huge step, as it meant I was officially committing to growing the business. I was nervous about the added responsibility, but it was also a relief to have someone to share the workload with. From there, things continued to snowball. I expanded my product offerings, added new designs, and began offering limited edition pieces that created a sense of exclusivity. I also started offering customization options, which became a major selling point for my brand. Customers loved the idea of having a one-of-a-kind piece in their home, and it helped differentiate my brand even further. Fast forward to today, and my business is thriving. I've expanded my team, and we now have a small workshop where we build all of our pieces. We've even started offering online courses for aspiring woodworkers who want to learn how to make their own furniture. I've been able to quit my 9-to-5 job and focus solely on the business, which has been a dream come true. But I'm not done yet. There's still so much more I want to achieve. Looking back, I realized that the hardest part was simply starting. It wasn't about having the perfect business plan or the most advanced tools. It was about taking that first step and committing to the process. There were times when I wanted to quit, when I thought I wasn't cut out for this. But now, I'm proud of what I've built. It's been a roller coaster ride, but it's been worth every minute. To anyone out there thinking about starting their own business, my advice is simple: don't wait for the perfect moment. Just start. You'll learn along the way, and you'll get better with time. It won't be easy, but if you're passionate about what you're doing, the rewards will come. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.